Let's start with this nice comment from Clint. He says, our second-half performance was incredible. It was bonkers. I'd lost hope. And I think that maybe speaks to the feelings of a lot of Spurs fans, because it then is taken on by Guards44, who says, why don't we play like that? Yet again, we put in unbelievable effort in the second half and deserve to go through. Conte has to change the way we start. So let's talk about that, because Eled says, this is what we do, isn't it? We go a goal down, we come alive again, then we scrape a win, then we repeat it week after week as if there's no problem. When will Spurs mix it up? Well, let's start with that question then. When will Spurs mix it up? When will we see a different Tottenham?
Well, yeah, I'm frustrated. I'm very similar to the fans' perspective. I just don't understand why you don't start on the front foot. It gives teams impetus. It gives them hope. It gives them belief. When you start like that, especially away from home, you're giving the impetus to the other team. It's just, I don't understand why you would retreat and invite pressure on. It gives the team a hell of a lot more confidence. They get string passes together. They play themselves
he doesn't trust
into
the players early, didn't he? Lack of trust.
Yeah, there's a potential for that, but defensively, are they as strong? He might think that he needs to get men behind the ball, bodies behind the ball. Like, for instance, Liverpool might leave 2v2, Man City might leave it 2v2 because they trust their defenders. Maybe there's a little bit of that, but I still think there's enough quality on that pitch to be more expansive, to go out and really take it to teams in the first half and do what they did tonight in the second half and do it for the full 90 minutes and win games more comfortably than they have been.
I mean, I get frustrated watching them in that sense, because you know what they've got in that team and what they're capable of. But on the other hand, you look at it and you see that, yes, there's areas where you can see for improvement, but I think you'd see that with every manager you can see just coming to club within that year, there's room for improvement. And I think in that area, what Crouchy's saying, I agree. But I think you've also got to look at the other side, of the flip side of the coin, where he's improved them mentally, where they're going a goal down, which is something they need to eradicate if they're going to improve and stay in the top areas of the league and continue on their run in the Champions League. But they're not folding. And I think Spurs teams of yesteryear have been accused of being teams that have soft centres maybe and would fold under them circumstances. This team are showing that fight, that grit, determination. Yes, it's their own doing, going behind and playing the way they do at the beginning of the game, but they're finishing games very strongly.
But if they're finishing them strongly, that's because they're changing the way they're playing.
Yeah.
And when they change the way they're playing, then they recover. I mean, we said earlier on this evening that they've managed to pick up the most points from losing positions in the Premier League and the Champions League this season. So if they started games the way they're finishing games, then by default, you would imagine that the results would be better.
I would love to be able to speak to Conte. I think he's the only person who's going to give us the answers. We can sit here and speculate, and we're saying what we see, and it's very evident and obvious when we show you these clips in a minute, the contrast between the first half and second half. But I think as a manager, you'd love him to come out and say, listen, I'm pulling my hair out here. This isn't why I set him up. But it's just psychologically, I don't know what's happened, but first half, they need almost to be going a goal down or get into half-time and going, we've got to now fight for something and something to go and grab. It's baffling to me, but I don't know whether it's the team, it's the manager's tactics, or they're just being forced by the opposition to play like this.
No, I think it's a set-up thing. I think they set up... The Champions League, Marseille at home, the atmosphere was electric. You thought, just go out and go and beat them. Go and beat them. And they were so... Very much the set-up of this game was very much the same. And it took Richarlison in the second half to get the goals to change all that.
And you see here, Son wins the ball. This is the first half. He's got one option in front of him. One option to play the ball in. And you ask the questions, why are they pinned back? Because he's got one option, and you see what happens. They get bodies back around him. They crowd him out. And Son's a top-class player, but he hasn't got enough options around him to help him to play that next pass. And they turn the ball over. Here again.
And obviously Son will be criticised for things like this, but if you've got no one around you, no help, and you're getting crowded out, it's very difficult. It doesn't matter what kind of player you are. It's the second half now, really.
Yep, and they win the ball here. And you see straight away, you've got players around them. They've got 3 players now making runs forward with the idea of actually getting up with and beyond. And I think that was the difference here. They wasn't winning the ball in these areas in the first half because they were so deep. When you get your team up against teams, and we'll see this next clip as an even better clip here, you see Bentancur, who jumps out here. You've got players locking onto people, you've got players locking in midfield as well. But they're on the front foot, and you look at the back line, they're on the halfway line, look. They're all on the halfway line. or playing in your opposing team's half is so different when you win the ball in these situations. You give yourself a chance to actually hurt the opposition.
More enjoyable, really, as well as players,
Yeah,
you know.
100%.
When they win it back here, look at the options now. Look at the options, right? Like, obviously, in the first half, he just didn't...
Nice.
Yeah,
You could just chip it to him.
he didn't play that one. But, like, these are the options you've got going forward. You've got 3 options. As soon as you win the ball back, you've got 3 options. Didn't have that in the first half. Harry Kane was back here, and there was no options to play, and they could break. And, you know, it's not attack me defence then.
And I mean, this is great. I mean, this in the end of the game, and you're sitting there thinking, right, go and finish it off now, go and punish them, and there's no need to stop this because this is a beautiful goal, wonderful finish.
I want to touch on Højbjerg as well. I think he gets I think people think he's a destroyer. I think he's got far more to his game than that. You know, see that finish there and his energy, and I think creatively plays good forward passes. He's integral to what Tottenham are doing.
By the way, Marseille will be kicking themselves at 1-1. They're in the Europa League. 2-1 down, they're out of Europe completely.
Yeah, they didn't seem to play like a team to me that understood where they were in the pecking order in the league at that point in the game. Like, there wasn't information coming on. I think that's vital. I've been in games when I was, especially early on in my career, in Europe, and I constantly was asking players in games, I'm like, where are we? Because sometimes a game can take over.
Yeah.
And I think far too many of their players weren't aware that, listen, if we just stay in this game, we'll be all right. Because you look at that goal at the end there, they've got nobody back. They've got 1 player back. It's like, they'll look back at this and they'll be sick with the way they approach that last part of the game.
So, Chris Cowden says Antonio Conte's now been in charge at Spurs for exactly 1 year. Personally, I think he's transformed our club and continues to take us in the right direction, back him, and will be successful. But then at the same time, Darren says it was a brilliant achievement to qualify for the Champions League, but I think we've gone backwards since last season when I thought there'd be more progress after Conte's first pre-season with us. Like, I think anyone that criticises Spurs at the moment, Conte would turn around and go, well, we're in the knockout stages of the Champions League and we're in a great position in the Premier League. Of course, they can play better, they can be more entertaining, they can get Spurs fans off their seats more often. But in terms of pure results, would you have expected any more from Conte than we've seen at this point?
No, I think he's done a great job. I think under Nuno, Mourinho at times, the club was going backwards. Under Nuno especially, it was a difficult time. I think he's come in, he's made them more solid. He's got them in the Champions League. You know, they were top of the league for a little bit this season. He's signed good players that have improved the club. They are moving in the right direction, certainly from where they were. We have to remember that. But there are little things that are so frustrating that you feel like there's more in there.
Yeah.
Certainly the way they start games is just not good enough, which is frustrating. But they've come on leaps and bounds from where they were.
I think Conte's real plan would be in his mind is to get to the World Cup and get to beyond that, get to the next transfer window and be in this type of position. Obviously, they'll be qualified for the Champions League knockout stages, be in and around the Champions League positions and say to Daniel Levy, now open that checkbook again and let me invest in this squad. Because I think he sits there and looks at his squad and thinks we're way off in terms of the other top 4, 5, 6 teams in terms of squad depth. You look at the bench today, how many of them was going to come on and change that game for Spurs?
They've got some bad injuries, though, at the moment.
Yeah, they have, but there's other teams who've got bad injuries as well. But you look at their benches, there's a difference still. The difference in the depth of the squads is huge, and I think he leans on that when you see bad results, when you see his interviews and he's a bit prickly in the interviews, and you see that he's actually, a lot of the time, he looks at the squad and you can see him, he's almost sitting there going, listen, guys, I need more help.
Yeah.
I need more investment.
And he said that, and I wonder how they feel, the current players feel, hearing a manager knowing that he needs reinforcements, or maybe that's just the modern game.
Yeah, I think he's strengthened really well in forward areas. I think they've got some... that stands up against any of the top 4 teams in our country, globally, you know, the front players. But defensively, like you say, if you're going to play a bit more expansive football, you need a real trust in your defence, and I don't think he's got that at the moment, and that's where he'll be looking to strengthen.
Well, you look, Sessegnon today played right wing-back. He had 3 right wing-backs who could play on the right-hand side on the bench. What does that say to them? What does that say to the board? He doesn't trust them players in them positions. You're playing a player out of position to fill that position on the right-hand side when you've got 3 players who are capable of, by trade, that's their position.
Okay.
Crazy.
Well, for all that we've spoken about, the way they're starting games, the way they're finishing games, the injuries they've got, where they go next, let's finish with Sam's question. How far do you realistically think Tottenham could make it in this Champions League campaign? And by the way, when you look at the big names that have fallen out of the competition already, let's just remind ourselves not to take the last 16 of the Champions League for granted.
I think they could go to the quarters. I don't see them going beyond the quarters because I think they'll have to get a big team after that. I think they might be quite fortunate and lucky in the next round. But after that, I do believe it will be just maybe a step too far, especially if they continue to give teams a head start in games.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I don't think they can win it. I don't think even the biggest Tottenham fan will tell you they can win it this year. I just think there's better teams out there at the moment. But they've done well to get through the group stage. It was a fantastic group. We all enjoyed watching it, twists and turns all the way. But yeah, quarterfinals is realistically the aim for them.